A good and close friend to introduce isn't necessary. So I do not need to tell you about Father Lapsley, a good friend. In between, you have become a good friend of all of us, I think. The topic is very interesting. The topic fits at the end of this conference. It's about forgiveness. It's about, again, about your work and you as a person. And I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy to hand over the microphone. Oh, the microphone. I even don't need to hand over the microphone. You have got one. Okay, good.
You. Thank you very much. For me, it was very moving to be here for the last session, and I just want to honor our sisters from Ukrainian, Russian, and German. I think none of us watch the same movie. None of us read the same book. None of us listen to the same speech. So I heard what was being said very much as a South African. So the terrible invasion by Russia of Ukraine has deep effects in South Africa, and of course on the African continent. Yesterday I had an email from someone in the United States saying, could I use my voice in favor of the arrest of President Putin when he's due to come to South Africa in August. I'd be quite happy to see President Putin arrested and go to the ICC. My problem is that I also wanted George Bush and Tony Blair and Netanyahu also to be going to the criminal court. So that is part of my challenge. And as I said in my first address, both yesterday and today, I've been talking with people in Myanmar. Correctly, there's major focus on Russia-Ukraine, but there's a forgotten war. The people in Myanmar under military occupation, and hardly anybody in the world notices. Just the one other element that worries me, if I could just share that, is that who is responsible for world peace within the UN system? It is the Security Council. Who are the greatest arms manufacturers in the world? It is the permanent members of the Security Council and Germany. And so many countries in the world, in the light of the Ukrainian-Russian war, the committing of national resources to arms manufacturing is something that should worry us all, and the threat of nuclear war. Those are just my opening comments. There's a sort of bridge, in a way, between the last session that we've had and this session. But I also say how honored I am to be the last speaker in terms of the addresses at this family meeting that we have been part of. And I also want to say, because I've been preparing for what I want to say, I've missed out on many of the presentations, but I've had beautiful conversations with quite a number of you in these days that I will treasure in my heart, just as my brother Pomelani, who also has had his own beautiful conversations. But I cannot help wondering about your own views on forgiveness, and how has your lived experience changed what you believe? When I spoke to you on Thursday evening, I mentioned that during this conference I would be having 2 encounters with people in Myanmar. The whole country is suffering under a very heartless military occupation with immense suffering. On top of that, many thousands have lost their homes in the cyclone that took place last week. The first meeting I had yesterday with our friends in Myanmar was with a group of Christians. I say that because I had a meeting today, and it was Christian and Muslim and Buddhist. First, they shared some of their pain, including losing all their possessions when they had to flee for their lives. Then they asked me 3 questions. First question, how can we forgive? How can we forgive? Second question, should we participate in the fighting? Third question, when the conflict comes to an end, how should we treat the perpetrators? Which of course relates to the first question. How can we forgive? Existential questions from people on the front line, just as our sisters were sharing existential questions from the front line. Let me share with you some thoughts about forgiveness. Hopefully you will excuse me when you hear me talking out both sides of my mouth on the subject of forgiveness. Often people, especially in faith communities, speak as if forgiveness is something glib and cheap and easy. But in my experience, most human beings find forgiveness costly, painful, and difficult. Sometimes I work with clergy of different churches. I ask them if they find forgiveness easy in their own lives. No, they reply. So then I ask them if when they preach, they tell their people that. Oh no, we never tell them that. When people are hurting, well-intentioned people, especially religious people, tell them that they should forgive. Unintentionally, we use forgiveness as a weapon against hurting people. When we are hurting, often what we need is a hug, not a sermon. We need our pain to be heard and acknowledged. Let me speak out the other side of my mouth. I have met people all over the world for whom forgiveness is the key to their healing. The inability to forgive imprisons some people. Hatred and bitterness become all-consuming. How beautiful to hear our sister today speak about resisting hatred and not being consumed by it. Interestingly, the Greek word for forgiveness in the New Testament, aphiemi, also means untying a knot. When there is unforgiveness, we are the prisoners of one another. All the great faith traditions have something to say about forgiveness. When I tell my story, I often say that I'm not full of hatred and I don't want revenge. Often someone will say after I've spoken, that I'm a wonderful example of forgiveness. Strangely, I had not mentioned the word forgiveness. As I stand here today in relation to my bombing in April of 1990, I have not forgiven anybody because no one has come forward and accepted responsibility. Personally, I do not know what it means to forgive an abstraction. If you do, that's fine. I don't. However, in my mind, I imagine an encounter with someone who was responsible for the bombing. Of course, the reality may be very different from my imagination. But in my imagination, someone knocks on my door and says, I am the one who sent you that letter bomb. Please, will you forgive me? What do I say? Yes, no, or not yet? I might ask, excuse me, sir, do you still make letter bombs? No, I work not far from you at the local hospital. Will you forgive me? Yes, I forgive you. And personally, I would prefer that you spend the rest of your life working at that hospital rather than be locked up in prison, because I believe much more in the justice of restoration than in the justice of punishment. So often when we say justice, we mean punishment, if not revenge. But there is another kind of justice, the justice of transformation, the justice of restoring relationships. Okay, so then I would suggest that we have tea together. So, sir, I have forgiven you, but I still have no hands. I still only have one eye. My eardrums are still damaged. I'll always need someone to assist me for the rest of my life. Of course, you will help pay for that person, not as a condition of forgiveness, but as part of reparation and restitution in the ways that are possible. That is one scenario. More recently, I have been confronted with the possibility that the key person involved in my bombing may be still working as a gun runner. I'm not sure what my response would be to such an encounter with that person. At the end of April, it was the 33rd anniversary of my bombing. The anniversary, and each anniversary, provides a particular moment of reflection. As the years have passed, I have found gratitude a very helpful pair of spectacles with which to live my life. So another part of me would like to meet the person who made the bomb and to thank him. Because of his actions, I have gained a worldwide ministry and the opportunity to contribute to the healing of the human family. I've lost hands, for which I will always grieve, but that has also given me the ability to connect with other people's wounds, who are less visible than mine, but no less real. In our work, the work of the Institute for Healing of Memories, we've been having a conversation for a long time about what we call bicycle theology. I wonder if you have bicycle theology in your country. I have already noticed in my days in Osnabrück that actually there are more bicycles than people. So, bicycle theology is when I steal your bike. Sometime later, I come back and confess that I have stolen your bike. I ask for your forgiveness. You forgive me, and I keep the bike. Often we reduce forgiveness to saying sorry, but we don't return the bike. We have a global network of healing of memories. We had a meeting of the network 2 weeks ago. One of the participants was from Namibia. I think you are all aware of the German genocide against the Herero and Nama people in 1904, during which between 24,000 and 100,000 Hereros were killed. 10,000 Nama were killed. My colleague Lizette in Namibia spoke about a forthcoming workshop in which there would be a couple of people from the German-speaking community. Later this year, there will be some people coming from Germany to attend in Namibia a Healing of the Memories workshop. Lizette said this was a breakthrough because of the feelings within the Herero and Nama people towards the German people. This speaks to healing the wounds of history, intergenerational trauma, and how do we return the bike? Of course, it also relates to how we find life-giving ways of responding to guilt and shame in relation to what previous generations did in our name and on our behalf. Many years ago, I met a woman called Abigail in the United States. She belonged to an organization called Relatives of Murder Victims Against the Death Penalty. The man who killed her daughter was on death row. Sometime after the death of her daughter, Abigail decided that she had forgiven the perpetrator. Then one day, Abigail read in the local newspaper that the perpetrator was about to be executed. Her instant response was, I want to be there to watch. Perhaps the early decision was in her mind rather than in her heart. It turned out the newspaper article was not true. Subsequently, the perpetrator wrote and asked if Abigail would be willing to meet with him. The family were divided as to whether or not she should meet him. She decided to go and meet with him. After the face-to-face encounter with the man who killed her daughter, Abigail forgave him. This journey had taken 13 years. Someone asked Abigail how she would feel if eventually the perpetrator was executed. Abigail responded, I would have lost a dear friend. I have found that many people find it within themselves to forgive terrible crimes committed by anonymous individuals or those who act as part of evil systems, But often the same people are unable to forgive family members and those with whom they have intimate relationships. I guess that is in part because we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in those spaces. Forgiveness is spoken about and encouraged in many holy texts, particularly in the Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. However, may I suggest that forgiveness is important for all human beings, regardless of whether or not people are religious. Would any marriage last for more than 5 minutes without forgiveness? I guess all the divorcees will stand up now. In his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, Archbishop Desmond Tutu tells the story of Beth Savage, who was injured when APLA, one of the guerrilla organizations in South Africa during the struggle, one of the APLA operatives attacked members and guests at the King Williamstown Golf Club. And I quote now from Archbishop Tutu. He said, Beth Savage told us she thought her father died of a broken heart. She said that even at the time of the hearing in 1996, she could not go through a security checkpoint at any airport. All sorts of alarms and lights would flash because she still had shrapnel in her body. What she said of her experience, which had left her in this condition, was quite staggering and unbelievable. And this is a quote from Beth Savage that Archbishop Tutu is quoting. All in all, what I must say is, through the trauma of it all, I honestly feel richer. I think it has been a really enriching experience for me, and a growing curve, and an ability to relate to other people who may be going through trauma. And Tutu goes on, when asked about how she felt about amnesty for the perpetrator, she said, it's not important for me, but I have said this to many people. What I would really like is, I would like to meet the man who threw that grenade in an attitude of forgiveness and hope that he could forgive me too, for whatever reason. But I would say very much, I would very much like to meet him. It's the end of the quote from Archbishop Tutu. So here was a white woman who was the victim of a black guerrilla fighter, recognizing that she needed forgiveness from him because of how she had lived her life as a white person in apartheid South Africa. My final story is about Amy Beale. Amy was a visiting student from the United States studying in South Africa towards the end of apartheid. She was killed by a group of angry young black people on the way home from a political meeting. Her parents, Linda and Peter, came to South Africa. They supported amnesty for the young men who had killed her. In honor of their daughter, they set up a foundation in South Africa and employed one of the young men who had killed their daughter. On one occasion, I was on a radio program with Linda Beale, the mother of Amy. Linda said that in terms of her own faith journey, there was never any other way forward but that of forgiveness. A woman phoned up, beside herself with anger. She screamed, "How dare you forgive?" Linda's choice to forgive confronted the caller with her own inability to forgive. So, dear family, forgiveness is often a long, difficult, and messy journey. Before people are able to begin that journey, they need their pain to be heard. Many people need the spirit of the divine to even want to forgive. It is also easier for the direct survivor than for the relative of the victim to forgive. Often the relative believes they owe it to the one who has died never to forgive. My friends, we have to figure out how to return the bike. I like to think of forgiveness as an act of healthy selfishness. What I need to do so that I may be free. So forgiveness is an act of self-liberation. Archbishop Desmond Tutu was correct. There is no future without forgiveness. May God bless us all. I thank you. Do you have time for a couple of questions? Do you have time for a couple of questions? Thank you, thank you. Like good peace-loving Germans, there was no time for questions yesterday, but I've negotiated with my leaders, and they say we have 10 minutes for comment. It can be a comment, a question, a feeling, but maybe not another speech.
Yeah. Okay. Comments, questions? Yeah.
I have a comment. I am deeply impressed by the way you not only speak very deeply and very touching about your own story and the environment where you acted in, but how much you include all the different stories and areas and people who are in different circumstances, but how much you include and you don't forget. And it feels really, it touches me deeply, and it feels healing to have this wide view. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm free.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.